I'm Dominic, everyone. I live in San Francisco. I work at 500 startups, a little bit about 500. We should probably change the name every day because the number keeps growing. So it's over 1,000 startups that we've invested in now. The investment thesis is to make many small bets. So primarily we work with companies that come into our accelerator. We usually make a seed investment somewhere between $50,000 to $125,000. And by doing that, we're able to spread and deploy money across many different companies, and then double down when we see traction, we see that some of them are going in the right direction. So of those 1,000 startups, we fund is 175 million, 105 is deployed, and 300, it's very international, so over 300 of those companies have been founders from overseas, so like not based in the US. A lot of them come to the US to do the accelerator program, which we run about, I think, 6 or 7 per year. And we also have an accelerator in Mexico City too. And 300 of those companies also have female founders. So we are pretty proud of being able to invest in like such a diverse group of startups. But we're also really proud of distribution because we think that one of the things that helps companies the most is not just money, but it's actually being able to figure out how to grow and get traction. So when I say distribution or distro, what I'm referring to essentially is like growth, right? So I'll just do this. Or not. One second. So let me tell you a little bit about my background. I started a company in college called Garment Valet. What it was a web-based laundry and dry cleaning delivery service. So we actually, picked up laundry and then did the laundry and then dropped off the laundry. It doesn't sound like a very sexy business, but what we did that was different was we put these digital lockers into all these condos and dorms, and then we had, probably the first iPhone app where our drivers would, scan clothes in and out, and then we built conveyor systems. So we really over-automated everything. The business is still around today, it's doing well. It expanded to 2 cities. I left right after college pretty much because I got involved with another friend of mine who was starting a company that had just gotten into Y Combinator. And that company was called Kako, or formerly Curebit. And what that company did was we built a platform that allowed e-commerce brands to get their customers to share with their friends. So if you've ever seen the referral deals, like give your friends $15 and you get $15 if they buy. So that was awesome. 500 also invested in that company. That's really where the connection is. That company is still going. Had clients like Bonobos, Shutterfly, Tom's Shoes, if you're familiar with any of those brands, as well as a lot of rocket internet companies. I left because I got sick of building an enterprise sales team. I got sick of hiring salespeople, and I wanted to do something different. So now I spend all my time working at 500, and what I do specifically is I work with the teams that are in the accelerator on early traction. So a lot of the companies that come to us, they already have some customers, but they might not necessarily know like what are the right channels. So we really try to figure out what is the best channel, how to double down, how to make a plan, and how to scale that customer growth. And then when they do well, then we reinvest. So if I had to say today's topic is something that I usually like to talk to teams about very early on in the accelerator, because essentially it's very easy to wait for growth by building product first. And so I like to talk about smoke tests because I find smoke tests are a way to validate your product before actually going out and building it, because you can wait months and months building something and not actually doing not getting any revenue. So I say that I live in between product and growth, and that's a really hard place to live because the product side of me is very perfectionist. I want everything to be perfect, and the growth side of me is just always like up and to the right, like let's just go, let's just get these numbers going. So let me tell you a little story about. Let me tell you a little story about my first business and why this matters to me so much. So here's an example of my first business, Garment Valet. Sometime in college, I won this award called Global Student Entrepreneur of the Year, and my head was all big, and I thought I was awesome, and I had all this press, and I believed it all. And that's like rule number one: is never believe your own press. So we had this problem where we kept growing, and that doesn't really sound like a problem, but we kept losing money too. So we kept saying to ourselves, we just need to sell more, and we didn't understand our unit economics. So essentially what was happening is like for every dollar that we sold more, we were losing more money. So we got to a point where we were losing like $30,000 a month, and it was just like everything seemed like it was everything just seemed like it was gonna basically disappear. And what we figured out was we're like, oh, okay, we just have a quality problem. We have a product problem. Like, what's happening is that we're losing customers. So we spent a year building software, like all this stuff, like the conveyor systems and like all these iPad apps that would like go into these dry cleaners. And finally, this automation was done, and we thought, oh, like now growth is going to happen. So what happened was the exact opposite. Sales that entire year just basically flatlined, because we didn't go out and we didn't market. And cash continued to go down. So this was a pretty scary thing. One night, basically what I did, hanging out in the office with a friend, is I figured out that all of our revenue was coming from 4 different pockets in Boston. So our problem had nothing to do with automation and product. Our problem had to do with the fact that we didn't understand our customers, and we didn't understand the right types of customers. So we were driving around, the city like madmen, delivering $20 orders all around here, and it just wasn't profitable. And every single profitable order was happening in one of those 4 pockets. Turns out those are all condo buildings. No surprise, right? So what we did basically that night was we sent an email out to all of the customers that were not in these 4 areas, and we said, hey, we're not servicing you anymore. Goodbye. And to the customers in the green areas, we're like, we want you to invite your neighbors. Please, like, invite your neighbors and we'll pay you. Of course, we said everything in a much politer term than that. But basically, we went from losing $30,000 a month to making $10,000 a month in profit in less than 30 days. And to me, what that meant was that the entire year that I was trying to build this like module, this operations app, was wasted because the product had hijacked our growth, and the growth was really, we should have been building the product around the growth. So if you're a founder, you've probably all been here. If not, you're probably doing awesome and you can just leave. No. If you haven't been here, you probably will be. And what it is it's when growth is slower than we want. And as a result of that, we always say like, oh, we just need that one more feature. We need that one more product addition. And if that's the case, your product backlog gets just longer and longer. And for every time you add a new feature or function, you're expecting that it's going to be this like amazing thing that's going to change your business. And most of the time, it ends up just being like this piddly little flame or like spark. And then what happens is that teams get demoralized and they start pointing fingers at each other, and you can't figure out what's really going on. So that's something that I call like the product growth dilemma. And the point of smoke test basically is to like kill that before it ends up killing your business. If you guys have seen American Psycho, you probably get the reference. So smoke test is how I do that. And so like I thought it would be useful and probably tactical to just go through a couple of things today about like how to run these types of like lean startup tests, because it's really just a way, from an engineering test standpoint, a smoke test is just making sure that your system's working right. But from a marketer standpoint, it's basically validating that your product backlog is worth it, or that you're working on the right things. So these are some other cool kind of like concepts and theoretical things, but I'd rather actually talk about process as opposed to kind of like the theoretical nature of smoke tests. So I was lucky enough to see a presentation that a guy named Brian Balfour, who was the VP of Marketing, VP of Growth for HubSpot, gave. And I'll write the link down too after, because it's a really fantastic process that he came up with for basically how growth works. And so I built a process around how to run smoke tests. Basically what you want to do is you want to find the absolute minimum proof that you need, how to do it with no engineers or writing as little code as possible, figuring out how to drive the right traffic so you're actually testing in a valid way, measure, figure out what conversion is, first of all, and then how to measure conversion. And then these last two steps, is optimize and make a decision, are just kind of this repetitive loop. So let me give you an example of proof, right? This really smart, really successful real estate agent came to me and he said, I want to make a Tinder for real estate agents. Like, not a real estate agent like meeting another real estate agent, but like his hypothesis was that if people could meet real estate agents based on who they, like what interests they have in common, that people would buy more homes or they would sell more homes. And he's like, I found this great development team, and they're only gonna charge me $100,000 to build this app, and it's gonna be huge. And I was like, oh man, like slow down. Before we even do that, let's just throw up a landing page and see if people even care about this app, right? So step one here was like finding the proof, and the proof usually starts with a hypothesis. So like in X for Y. So that my hypothesis here was that if people come to this page and they're actually interested in building, in getting an app, they're going to click download in the App Store. And if that happens, then that means that there's some interest and maybe we should actually consider building this thing. So the hard part here then is like, if somebody clicks this, then they expect an app. So it's a little messed up to trick your customers or potential customers, but in my mind this was just another like part of the hypothesis. So in the second stage, after somebody clicked, whether it was the Apple Store or the Google Play Store, I basically said, you know, if you want early access, enter your information here. So the hypothesis here was that if people really want this, then they'll actually enter their information. So turns out that nobody really wanted this app. So it's a good thing he didn't spend $100,000. And now, if you go back to steps like 5 and 6, if this was something that, a project that I was like really, really passionate about and really wanted to work on, I probably would have come up with like 5 or 6 different variations, because like maybe homie was the wrong name, maybe the headline was the wrong name, maybe the design was the wrong thing. So like in California, like I thought it was kind of cool, like homie, get a home, you know, that's a term that we use a lot. But there's all sorts of things that could have gone wrong here. So like the decision that we made was to just drop it because none of us really just cared enough about it. But a lot of this has to do with like step number 3 is driving the right traffic. So I think that the easiest way to figure out if you have the right traffic is if people are sharing what you're doing. So I look at everything as a share rate, and that's basically the number of people that are presented with an option to share your business. What percentage of those people actually do end up sharing? And generally, as a rule of thumb, like without an incentive, if that's above 5 to 10%, that means that you probably have the right traffic, like you have the right audience, people actually care about what you're doing. And of course, naturally, when you start to incentivize people, it's going to go up. So how many of you have heard of NPS in the room? Net Promoter Score? So yeah, Net Promoter Score is another great way to figure out if you have the right audience. The problem is that as startup founders, especially very early on, we usually don't have we don't have a big enough audience, and running the actual calculation is kind of tricky, and that it's also like what people say they're going to do versus what people actually do are 2 totally different things. So that's why I just like to see like where are they sharing. So step number 4 is keeping score. So on every page you need to have analytics. So Google Analytics, if you've never used it, is a free, really simple, easy to use tool. It doesn't allow you to break down users into cohorts though. So if you have a lot of people signing up, it's really important to also look at, use something like Mixpanel, because then you're going to be able to see retention curves and cohorts over time on an individual user basis. But basically when you keep score, it allows you to track and see what you're doing. And if you don't do that, there's no point in even like running a smoke test. Again, going back to this like step of like, what are the next steps? Everything has a trade-off. So no test is really perfect, unless you're maybe like Walmart.com or GE or Cathay Pacific, and you can afford like that level of audience or statistical significance. So the trade-off that I see with startups is that a lot of startups say, oh, but how do we know if it's statistically significant? And a lot of times you don't. A lot of times at test you only have like, maybe a sample size of 200. So you have to just keep iterating and going back and forth through that process, because most times you're going to kind of land on this maybe step. Maybe homie wasn't the right name. Maybe the headline wasn't right. Maybe the picture was the wrong color. But that kind of like constant iteration allows you to basically get smarter, and it allows you to basically get more gelled with your team and come to better like decisions or like kind of gut instincts. So here's another example of landing pages. And a lot of the teams I talked to today, it was kind of like some of the teams were pre-product, some of the teams were product, and a lot of it's like, well, what do we do before our product even launches? And the most important thing in my mind that you can do before a product launches is build your audience. So start collecting email addresses, put a remarketing pixel, like something like AdRoll, on your website so that you can build an audience that you can later serve ads to. That's a free thing to do, because if you're lucky, 95% of the people that come to your site are not going to convert on that first step. So a micro conversion like an email is really important. So here's an example of iteration and why different variations can really make a difference. So I had this idea with some friends. We couldn't figure out what we wanted to eat, so we wanted to build this app called Surpriser, which basically we'd say like, I don't like fish, surprise me. And then there would just a magical meal would appear from some delivery service. So this page here it asked people for an email and a zip before we were live. And it had a terrible conversion rate. It had like 3% of people entering their email zip. And we looked at the analytics and we figured out, well, it's a desktop site, most of the traffic is mobile, and obviously right here, like, it's not that compelling to enter your email if there's no instantaneous gratification. So the next night we ran another test. Really crappy design, by the way, but that's my fault. We just asked people to enter their zip code to get started. So they landed, and it said like, hey, enter your zip code to get started. 30% of the people that landed on this page entered their zip code to get started. And then on the next page, again, it's kind of like tricky. We're like, hey, what a surprise, we don't service you yet. But at least it made sense because there was a zip code thing there. We asked them to just enter their name and email. 25% of the people entered their email there. And on the next page, over 10% of the people share. So what this told me was that there actually is a viable business. And if I had just gone with this, I would have thought that there was no interest. So whether the business was viable or not is debatable, because food businesses are very hard. There's very low profit margin. It's a very crowded space. But what it told me was that at least there was demand. It was enough to pursue. So a third example, which is really awesome, is this company Pigeon Box. And 500 startups has invested in Pigeon Box in 3 rounds now. They are also the first distro fund investment that we made, which means that like we not only invest money, we also invest time. So somebody like me is like their interim head of growth. What Pigeon Box does is they allow parents to send monthly care packages to their kids at college, and they have been wanting to do this thing where last minute we just add something to the box, and people can it's basically a way to upsell people. So in order to do that, what we figured out was it was like a Tuesday or it was a Monday or something like that, and we thought, okay, well, we're really busy, let's talk about this on Friday. And then we blocked off some time that we were gonna talk about it on Friday. And then I started thinking like, well, no, because this isn't gonna work, because then it's gonna take a developer 2 weeks to build this thing, because we don't have an extra engineer to actually like develop this feature of doing this automatic upsell. And then we're gonna have to test it for a week. So potentially 1 whole month is wasted. And guess what, like, that means that the box wouldn't have gone out until, the feature wouldn't have been ready until June. This is a college season business. So the last box had to go out April 28th. Otherwise, like, there'd be no box to add anything to. So instead what we did is we just did this like really hacky way where we just sent an email out. We looked in the store and we saw what are the extra items that we could even sell. We put those just into an email. We sent it out to everybody who was going to get a box. We just had one link that they clicked. And if they clicked that, it just took them to a success page. It says, thank you, this has been added to your box. And we just tracked how many people clicked it from what email. Then we manually charged people, we just had an Excel sheet. We just sent the factory that says, hey, these people get these extra items. And we just manually charged them the extra like $10 or $14. So the results here was that over 10% of active subscribers converted. So that's a huge conversion rate. It meant that there was like that gross profit for them was 45% higher that month. So this is a way that within like 2 hours, we did not build a product. We just hacked some shit together and made it and just did a test. And now we know that like this is actually something that we're going to do in the future, and that this works, and that this can really move the needle. And even if we had lost, we still would have won, because as a team, like, we felt good, we didn't waste time, and we learned about our customers. So that's why this kind of like whole approach to doing smoke tests and trying to validate things before actually building them is really, really important. And I'm going to go through some of the tools and stuff like that I like to use. This is my contact information. I'm just going to leave this up here in case anybody wants it. We'll send this deck around too in case people want it. But essentially, so some of the tools that I like to use, if you're familiar with Instapage or Unbounce, those are two very, very easy to use like website builders. Facebook ads are incredibly easy to use. And I imagine, I haven't looked at the prices out here, but I imagine that the prices are probably cheaper too. There's tons of tutorials online on how to use Facebook ads. And the reason why I like using Facebook ads and just simple landing pages is because it can happen instantaneously. So for as little as like $50 to $100, you can basically drill down exactly into the type of audience that you suspect is going to be your customer. And then you can drive them to a page and see how they react. Yeah?
Question. So if you're doing B2B.
If you're doing B2B.
Yeah, if you're doing something
yeah.
that you like somebody would buy in a professional capacity during their work hours. So you don't really expect it to be, at least that's my.
So I use Facebook ads for B2B stuff too. And I don't know, I mean, this may be a cultural difference. Maybe people here are not even like allowed to be on Facebook at work, like maybe the firewalls block it. I know that happens in some US companies. But one of the things that I love to use for B2B is a tool called outreach.io. And it's basically reply-driven email sequences. So let's say, do you have an example of a B2B product that you want to run through?
A tool for like project managers who do software.
Cool. So some sort of like project management software tool. So let's say that you want to sell this and you have this hypothesis that you want to reach out to engineering managers because like that's who's going to use this. I would come up with a list of the top 100 or 200 companies. I would then say that I would then upload that list into something like a platform like Elance or Odesk, and I would have a team, usually somewhere in India or in the Philippines. It's relatively cheap, and you can use just go under lead generation and say I want the email address of all the engineering managers at this company. Within usually 24 to 48 hours, I don't know how they get the emails. They just scrape the internet somehow, or they use data.com. It comes back with a list of emails. Then you upload that list into Outreach, and you have 7 or 8 different emails that are sequenced out, and it's all reply driven. So if somebody replies, they're never going to get email number 2. If somebody replies after email number 4, they're never going to get email number 5. But it just keeps sending these really short, succinct, non-salesy emails that are conversational just directly from your Gmail. And that's a great way to just like validate, like, hey, are people responding? Are they taking my conversations? Or are they even like opening these emails? So there's all different levels of funnel that you can talk about, that you can optimize for. And tomorrow I'm going to get more into like the actual framework of like funnel optimization at each stage. But that's how I would do B2B validation.
That's a great tip. So real short, have you, like, personally I haven't tried. Didn't seem like the best channel to validate B2B stuff. Have you had success on Facebook ads with B2B stuff? Do you have
Yes.
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 Awesome.
And I know specifically that like it depends what type of B2B product you have. Like typically, if you're selling enterprise software, it probably like your price tag is above like $2,000 or $3,000 a month. It probably isn't the best venue for it. But for example, like one of the companies I mentioned earlier, Instapage, they've grown rapidly fast, and they've used Facebook ads, and it's primarily B2B. It's businesses, small businesses that are using it. So I know that there's like some success there. Cabbage is another company that has a lot of success with that. So yeah, by the way, ask me questions because the presentation is over. But no, but yeah, I'd love to like, more important than like talking about like myself and this stuff, I'd really love to just like answer any questions or talk about anything that people might want to talk about. Yeah.
Question about this conversational emails that you mentioned. So
Yeah.
you write them or it's generated for you?
Yeah,
So you
great
write-
question.
right?
So it's a template, right? And so usually in the first email, I get a lot of emails where people try and actually sell me on things. And they're like, hi, Dominic. I am selling software for da-da-da-da-da. You should use it because it's this amazing and this is the, and it's like the first email, nobody's going to buy off the first email usually. So the first email I've had the best success rate with is usually just a very vague subject line, something that's like, I actually use the @ symbol. Like, this subject line's probably going to stop working because I fucking tell everybody. It's going to become like the spammiest subject line in the world. But it'd be like, @Dom, I use this symbol, I just say like, is this for you? And like, there's no magic, there's nothing magic about this particular subject line, but it's just highly relevant and it piques curiosity. And so usually I see around like a 65 to 70% open rate, which is pretty high. Then that email, I usually say, like let's say that I was selling referral software, just because I'm used to selling referral software. I would say something like, hey Jim, I see that you're connected to so-and-so online, and I would have like those LinkedIn connections that I port into the spreadsheet. Be like, he's an awesome guy, I know him too. We're helping companies like Bonobos and Toms increase sales by 25% month over month. I'm excited because I think we could probably do something similar for you. Would you have 15 minutes to talk? So I'm not talking about referral software. All I'm doing is I'm saying like, hey, I'm doing something awesome for somebody else. We have a degree in connection. There's a little bit of like vagueness in there. And then the goal is just like, it's not actually, do you have 15 minutes to talk? You usually just want to say like, when do you want to talk? Because you don't want to actually have them reply and you're like, no, I don't want to talk to you. And a lot of people will reply and just be like, get lost. But what I found is that, yeah, I've pissed off a lot of people doing sales. What I've found is that usually people don't respond until it's like the third or the fourth email. And none of these emails have unsubscribe links in them because they're all just coming from my Gmail account. It's still all automated. But it's finally they just feel bad for you maybe, and they just reply, and then you get a conversation, and out of those, hopefully you get clients. Hopefully that answered. Yeah.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
Follow up on that. So
Yeah.
what's the automatic software? Does it like put 2 weeks pause between mails or something like that? Or?
So I usually do, there's no magic sequence. I usually do like, day 0 when you send it. It's the first one, and that's usually the example I just did. Then like on day 3, I usually, I do it as a bump. So it just moves that thread up. So instead of sending a new email, it moves that original one back up in their inbox. And you do that just by having a reply in the subject line. And I'm like, hey, just wanted to make sure you got this email. Then usually on day 5, I send something that's like, hey, is there a better person to talk to? Because like, I sent you 2 emails and you haven't replied. On day like 8, I'll be like, on day 8, I'll actually go into like a sales email, because it's like at that point I have nothing to lose. And it's like, hey, I know I write short emails, maybe I was too vague. The reasons I wanted to talk to you are like, dum, 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 bullet, bullet, bullet. If they still don't respond, then I try and send them some like content on day 12, and then I usually space this out for like 30 days, and then just like bump it up and be like, hey, like, want to chat? Yeah.
So you're doing all this pretty much cold, like you don't really research the person at all?
So it's completely cold. There's a really cool software that we just invested in actually, that just went through our accelerator, called ProLeads. And what they've done, that's probably really small, nobody would want to see that. But what they do is they actually map all of the connections between you and who you're trying to sell to. Yeah, you got it right there? Yeah.
But this is Conspire actually, but
Oh, Conspire is awesome too, and Conspire is free. But basically, it maps all the connections so that you can kind of like import in column A is like the person you're reaching out to, and column B is like your first degree connection, and then you can kind of build templates around like automating like how you know that person so that it looks like really, really relevant. It makes it look like a person wrote the email, even though a person didn't write the email. Cool. Any other questions or follow-ups?
Sorry.
Yeah.
Referring to your questions about these emails that you're preparing everything, I suppose that it was a really exhausting job for you or for your team. And I realize that probably you are using this ProLeads software in order to manage all these, let's say, leads. So regarding to this, did you calculate any return on investment regarding to your time investment into analyzing all these leads, all these make all this conversation with particular users?
Yeah. Awesome question. So if you guys couldn't hear that in the back, basically it was like, did I ever calculate ROI, not just from like a money perspective, but from a time perspective? And the answer is no, like not well enough. Because I usually just figure out like as a founder, I usually don't spend a lot of time looking back specifically on activities for ROI, because I'm always just hustling and going. So I just kind of get this gut feeling where it's like, I spent a lot of time, am I getting conversations? So it's all really relevant to like what you're selling. So like, yeah, if you're selling something that's $20 a month, spending like all this time to do this, probably doesn't work. But you could simplify it, and you don't have to do the whole connections. I happen to be selling referral software that was $10,000 a month, so it made sense to do it. Yeah.
Do you put unsubscribe link on the emails?
So on these emails, I do not. I specifically leave it an unsubscribe link out of there, because my belief there is that it's coming from my Gmail inbox. It's as if I'm sending you a direct email. If it was like a broadcast email where I was just like, hey, buy some shit, then I would definitely have like an unsubscribe link in there. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you search for connection on LinkedIn? Is there some specific way that you do it?
Yeah, so connections on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great tool for that, but Conspire is a free tool that you connect your LinkedIn to and your Facebook, and it can show you those direct connections. And then like a more enterprisey version would be the ProLeads one that does that.
This brings me to this Twitter thingy we talked about. Is there a tool that you can actually apply to Twitter, similar tool? You can like research your connections on Twitter regarding the industry they're in, or something like that?
Yeah, so there's Twitter does give you some insights if you go into their ads platform. So say for example that like you're selling a photography product and you know that a lot of people follow a certain photographer. You can just target ads at anybody who follows that specific person. And then Twitter also has Twitter cards, which is a really cool ad product, where without leaving the stream, people could just like give you their email address. So like within the Twitter stream, it's like, and like this is kind of like the clickbaity thing where it's like, find out the top 3 ways to like take the best photographs ever. You know, click here and you just submit your email, and that's a great acquisition tool to get emails. And that works really cool for B2B. So that makes Twitter is a great way to validate for B2B. What's that?
Yeah, you said if you have around 200 customers and you send emails to them. I want to ask, is there also a tool where you can find those 200 companies from a certain niche? Do you just Google them or?
Yeah. So, for example, trying to find the right matches for like businesses, or trying to like, what it really comes down to is like a persona. Whether it's a business you're selling to, or whether it's a group of customers you're trying to sell to. Like think about companies that would use your product. So you could use like Hoover's actually I don't know if I think they might be paid, but you could use LinkedIn, the advanced search, and you could say, you know, companies that are in this industry, that have this many employees, that make more than this amount of money, that are in this geographical area. You can kind of like, and then you just get a list of the companies, and then you can just use like a tool like import.io to just scrape all the source code, and then you just have a list of those companies, and then you send that off on Elance or Odesk. So yeah, it's getting really tactical there, but hopefully it's helpful. Yeah. Cool. Well, any other questions or time for cell check to? Well, yeah.
I want to ask you. Do you have some experience with companies who create games? And how game company is a great problem. We create more code, and the period of our project to create our project is too long.
Yeah.
And I started to create games. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And last 6 months I create only web page, and now I create small cartoon for YouTube. That we want to feedback it is good for all populations, but that's great problem because the games need too much people to create. We have seven, 8 people. We need place where we work. We need all they stick together.
Yeah.
And we don't have much time to create this email list. I believe that I want to use Facebook for the only Facebook pay, and that's enough for me. I believe that Facebook have a good place to invest it, to recognize that this is my project. Can you tell me a better way to create some how to say? My English is like look Russian.
Some better way to find customers or to
Yes,
validate?
better.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so games are really, so smoke tests, unfortunately, are not like a silver bullet. They can't be used on everything. Like a game, for example, you have to actually have a game in order for people to use it. What you could do is you could buy some really cheap ads inside similar games on a mobile ad exchange network, and drive people to a landing page that has like this YouTube video. And if they watch the video, it's like, you know, want to be the first person to get this game when it comes out, like enter your email and we'll get it to you for free or something like that. And that could be a way of validating whether or not you should build the game, and also how to get users. But off the top of my head, that's like the only idea that I have. But yeah, I'll think about it. Yeah. Yeah.
You just talked about if you have a product and you want to sell to in the wide audience, and I was wondering if you had an application or or something that you want to sell to big companies. And for example, I have 100 potential customers in whole Earth. So I just lost about 4 months getting into Samsung because I was just talking to low-level management, and after 4 months I actually get in, and they gave me support. So I expect the same thing for other big companies. Do you have some strategy for faster entrance in those kind of companies?
So selling to big companies is always really hard because sales cycles take a really long time. One of the best ways to do it is to find common connections and to ask for introductions. And I always like to try and start from the top down. So lots of times when I'm trying to sell a company on something, I'll find out who their investors are. I'll then go talk to if I'm friends with the investor, then that helps. But if not, I probably know another investor who can make an introduction, and then the investor makes an introduction to somebody who's high level enough, and then it trickles down to somebody who can be your kind of internal champion. That's usually for big enterprise deals, that's usually how I would approach it.
Thanks.
Hopefully that helps. Yeah.
So just to add, maybe sometimes you can use advertising agency. For example, if there is a client that has an advertising agency, maybe you can talk to the agency in order to make the connections regarding to the strategy that agency sell to the client and your product. So.
Yep, that's a really good point. Agency partnerships are awesome if you can pull them off. Yeah. As a startup, building partnerships is really challenging because bigger companies always have you, and they lots of times don't trust you yet because it's like that chicken and the egg problem. But yeah, that's a fantastic idea. All right, guys, thanks. This has been really awesome.